Keeping with the theme of innovation, Bruce Aust, Vice Chairman of NASDAQ, will join Sue Siegel, the CEO of GE Ventures and Healthymagination at GE, to discuss how ambition and disruption place dynamic companies on top of the ever-changing landscape of innovation, gaining the highest yield for social and economic impact. Please welcome Bruce and Sue.
Good afternoon. Did you know we were going to talk about that?
I did.
It's always good to know.
They gave me a clue.
Well, first, let me just thank Landmark Ventures again for putting on this event. And it's great to see them put it on in Silicon Valley, actually. We thank you for coming here. Today, what we're going to do, and I think a lot of you actually know Bruce, particularly those from Israel, because of how many times Bruce actually spends there. But we're really lucky to have him. And we're not only going to talk about the market, we're also going to talk a little bit about innovation and how Bruce is really thinking about that as it relates to financings and what he might be worried about in terms of the world of financings. Bruce has been now at NASDAQ 18 years. And
years this year. Yeah.
Really has been absolutely fundamental to the shaping of NASDAQ. And in addition to that, he just most recently put into place the Entrepreneurial Center in San Francisco. How many of you guys have actually been there? Have you? So you've got some that have visited. We just had an event with NASDAQ, and I promise you I'm not his agent, but I will tell you the following. We hosted a number of our portfolio companies up there, and it's just a really fantastic place and setting to get sort of the vibe of Silicon Valley and at the same time the aspiration of really growing up as a successful company. So I'd encourage you to really have a chance to visit it. But with that, we're going to do three themes today. One is really around NASDAQ in Israel. The second one is really around innovation. And then the third area that I'm going to do, and this is all going to happen in the next few minutes, is to talk about sort of market conditions, which everybody is, of course, interested in. So first question for you. It's been 45 years, and you call yourselves the home for entrepreneurs. And when you think about that, Israel now represents about 10% of NASDAQ's listings. Tell us a little bit about why is Israel so attractive for NASDAQ and vice versa? Why should the Israeli companies be attracted to NASDAQ and not other exchanges?
Right. Well, it is 10% of the international companies, and I spend quite a bit of time there because there are such great entrepreneurs that are really building great companies. So NASDAQ is known for all these great companies that start in somebody's dorm room or apartment, and they come to be great companies ringing the bell at NASDAQ. And so I think the Israeli market just is naturally drawn to that. They see the opportunity for better valuations, better investor pools and liquidity, and to really grow and scale their companies. So it's been a great partnership.
And how have you sort of cultivated the just the relationships in Israel? How do you go about doing that? How do they know? How do they reach out to you? What are sort of some of the processes? Because they're a little bit different than what you do here.
Yeah, well, we were the first exchange to really in the U.S. to start marketing in Israel. We saw a great opportunity there with a lot of the great tech companies that were there, and we do have a relationship salesperson that's assigned out of London to cover Israel. He's there once a month. I'm there at least twice a year, and when you look at the fact that we also do a lot to help bring visibility to those companies in the U.S. and help grow their companies, we have a lot of services that help them be public companies. So we really do provide a platform more than just being a place where their stock trades, and I think that really helps us differentiate ourselves from other exchanges.
And I think some folks actually don't know all the services that you actually provide. Just spend a minute, in fact, of just describing along the way the journey before, during, and all the way through as the companies mature and stay listed with you.
Well, we've come a long way. I've been with, as you said, 18 years at NASDAQ. I've got to run the global listings business for 13 years. And we realized a few years back that trading is commoditized. And so we really have to say, what does a listing on an exchange mean? And we thought we can do a lot more than just list companies. We can help them be public companies. So we went out and started acquiring assets that would, in their investor relations field, or corporate communications, or corporate governance, that really help companies be public companies. So today, an IPO on NASDAQ will get a starter kit. They get basically what we call an IPO in a box. So it's everything you need from a regulation standpoint to successfully, your IR website, webcasting of your earnings calls, press releases, all those things that you need, whistleblower hotline, all those regulatory things that you need to be a public company, we provide that to you. And we own those services, and so I think it's a different value prop than any other exchange. We also, as was talked about earlier, a lot of companies are staying private longer. So we actually launched the NASDAQ private market, which allows companies to really access capital at the private market stage as well. So we want to be the one-stop solution for any company that wants to raise capital at any life cycle, any stage in their life cycle. So we think that's important.
So talk about that a little bit more, because not everyone knows how you go about providing those advisory services and how you're in fact making those sort of matchmaking overall.
Well, after the Jobs Act, we did take a look at that. And so when you went from 500 to 2,000 investors, we thought, well, if you have 2,000 investors, you could actually create a liquid market. And so we launched the NASDAQ private market about 2.5 years ago. As we got into the private market space, one of the biggest pain points we saw was cap table management. And we're like, most of the companies we were dealing with were to do liquidity events that were managing their cap table on an Excel spreadsheet with a law firm. And we're like, we can probably do better than that. We're a technology company. So we bought a company called Exact Equity, and we have a software that will help companies manage their cap table today. And that helps us then really create the liquidity programs. And this becomes a retention tool for employees. I mean, it is about raising money, but also a lot of these companies do want to retain their employees, and it's expensive to live here in Silicon Valley, or even in Tel Aviv, it's gotten expensive. And to provide liquidity to those employees so they can buy homes and cars and pay for their college educations is critical. So we provide that platform. We had built it up to about 90 companies on the platform, and then last December we bought Second Market, which is the other player in the space. So we are by far the largest player in the space for private market transactions.
That's great. So sort of the last question around market for a second. So about 70% of the 2015 IPOs are trading below their price. And so how does NASDAQ work with them and advise them in terms of that particular condition? What can you do to help that situation?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, obviously, the market's been extremely volatile. January was the worst January we've seen in many years, and it really did shut down the IPO market. So I think, we really focus on helping companies with the investor relations tools we have to make sure they're targeting the right investors, they're getting their story told in an effective way. We have perception studies. We have a lot of tools to help them understand, are they reaching the right investors? But at the end of the day, it's market volatility. So when they're working with their bankers, I've been at many first trade ceremonies where the CEO sees a stock skyrocketing and they're like, no, calm down. Because at the end of the day, they have to live up to that price that the stock is going to. So we really try to make sure that there's a reality to kind of where you want to price your stock, and that's good for the early investors, but also good for you as a company because you have to live with that.
And how engaged do you get in that conversation around pricing?
Well, that's really, the banks are really going to handle that. That is their territory, and they're going to deal with the pricing, and so we leave that totally up to them and making sure they're.
But you've done over 200 or so you kind of have a real sense for that. Right?
It's just really, we make sure that the companies do understand that you've got to live up to that number quarter after quarter, and investors don't like surprises. You've got to be very predictable in your returns and kind of what you're promising and guiding. So predictability is a big key of the market today. And so if you're not able to predict those earnings 12 months out, then you will be punished by the investors.
All right, let's turn to innovation. And since I know our time is short, talk a little bit about just why you created the Entrepreneurial Innovation Center. What does it represent for NASDAQ, and what do you think it's going to be able to do for the entrepreneurial ecosystem here?
Yeah, so the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center is being funded by NASDAQ Educational Foundation, and we had supported entrepreneurial programs for many years, and we finally said, we're supporting a lot of great programs, but we could probably do this ourselves. We have an ecosystem of great entrepreneurs that would be willing to give back to these young entrepreneurs, and we really thought it was our place to educate the next generation of entrepreneurs. So it's a great facility. It has got classrooms that you can access online and in person, and really learn startup finance, startup law. We talk about dilution for early stage entrepreneurs to make sure that their investments are handled appropriately. We do cap table management, we do media training, all sorts of courses. So And as I talk to entrepreneurs, they're like, I wish I'd had a place like that to go when I was a young
Absolutely.
entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
So we think we're building something that we're pretty excited about, and we've got some great programming, so we hope people will participate in it.
And are you doing things for VCs in particular to really help that sort of pipeline, if you like?
Yeah, well, we've had great partnerships with a lot of the young incubators in the city. Galvanize, Y Combinator have all been part of our programming. But we also work with the VCs on educating their early stage startups as well. So we did a stock option course not too long ago with NEA at the center. So I think those are the type programs that we think are valuable. We also have the ability to host, if you want to do an investor meeting and then also meet the CEO type thing at the center, we can do that as well. So it's a great space, very flexible, and I think we'll probably do over. We had about 700 entrepreneurs through this center already. This launched last September. Our goal this year is 2,000, so we feel good about where we're headed.
It's almost one-stop shopping for all of your needs and going up and down the value chain in terms of making sure you've got the relationships, it sounds like.
And we want to be the exchange where you look to really help raise capital and grow your company.
So but what about innovation at NASDAQ? Yeah. So when you look around, how do you stay current? How do you make sure NASDAQ stays cutting edge? Because there's so many different methodologies of financing these days. Why is it attractive to be with NASDAQ, and what do you worry about? What do you see on the horizon?
Well, we were the first exchange to pioneer electronic trading, and now you go around the world and every exchange trades electronically, and we actually, people don't realize this, but we run not only NASDAQ, but we run 80 exchanges around the world. We're in 50 different countries. So we are a technology company ourselves. We actually have a great partnership now with the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange that we just announced. So we have to be constantly on the edge of what is the best technology. Obviously, cybersecurity is a big issue for us. And as we look at what trading will look like in the future, we're looking at things like blockchain, and can blockchain actually help with clearing and settlement? So we applied that to the NASDAQ private market in our early days, and we do think that at some point we'll see blockchain be a solution for our clearing and settlement.
And what does that look like, though? What sort of value does that bring to the entrepreneurs that want to take their companies public? And then, of course, the NASDAQ we understand, but overall to the shareholders?
Well, it's cost and friction of trading. Anytime you can lower those costs and really make it easy to clear and settle your trades, that's going to benefit the investors as well as the companies that are being invested in. The fact that stocks in the U.S. take 3 days to settle today is just kind of ridiculous in 2016. So we think there should be faster clearing and settling and a lower cost clearing and settlement functions, and I think that'll happen.
And what's it going to take for you to decide we're ready to do that?
Well, it's a big engine that's got it's been built over hundreds of years, and you've got to kind of figure out a way to disrupt that. But as we've seen in many industries, there are great disruptions out there. And so blockchain is one where it's basically allowing a ledger kind of to see how the stock moves from one to the other. We're trying the private market, a small sample, and then as we have the ability to develop in other markets, we think it'll be a great platform for us to go forward.
So can I just ask, do you think it would be in one market versus the other you would go first with blockchain? Well,
you obviously have the ability to use blockchain or those type of new technologies in developing markets. So we have a really great relationship with the Istanbul Stock Exchange as well, or we own the Estonia Stock Exchange and the Baltic Stock Exchanges. So in smaller developing markets where you don't have the infrastructure already built in, then you have the ability to kind of disrupt.
And then understanding this notion of the late stage financing, pre-IPO financing. We heard Tim very eloquently describe the various things of why companies choose to stay private. Right. You've introduced the notion of we're going to be your financier, we're going to help you be financed regardless of where you are in your process. But what does that do to the platform of NASDAQ per se as it relates to the actual exchange? And how are you thinking about that in the continuum overall?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Tim brought up great points. I mean, it is harder to be a public company today with all the regulations and the requirements. I mean, we work closely with the SEC and to really kind of really not put a one-size-fits-all to all these companies so that they have less restrictions, but it's a lot to be a public company today. So we do think that with the private market, if you get the right number of investors in that market, you could stay private longer. We're seeing that. The average company in the 2000s during the dot-com era they were private for 3 years. Today it's 8 to 10 years. So we are seeing this happening longer. I think that what Tim talked about as far as large institutional investors coming into the market, that dynamic wasn't happening in 2000. And again, they're there to try to get an edge in performance, and I think that's going to continue. So it's just a different time, and I do think the Jobs Act has been good for allowing companies to be better prepared when they go public. They can file confidentially, and they go out and test the waters and meet with investors before they actually go public. And I think all those things have been a positive for the market.
And can you tell us a little bit about your acquisition of Second Market? Just how has that contributed to the equation?
Well, Second Market was the other player in the space. I mean, they had a different approach. You know, our focus is very company-centric, so we won't take trades on a private company shares unless the company authorizes it. So we're totally focused on creating liquidity for the company and not just for the investor. So I think that's a different approach than what Second Market had. So we obviously have changed that market now.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, it's just really about helping those companies access liquidity. And I said we've done a lot of these what we call known buyer programs, where you have a big institutional investor like a Fidelity or a T. Rowe Price, and then we allow and facilitate the transaction that allows the employees to take some liquidity and actually get some money off the table.
All right, so the lightning round, since we're down to the last few minutes here. What are you most excited about in the entrepreneurial ecosystem today in Israel?
In Israel? Well, I think it's in Israel and it's across the world, but it's the fact that there's so many different ways to raise capital today. Go back 20 years ago, it was all VC and early stage angel investors, and today there's just so many different ways you can raise capital.
Okay. So when you think about what you would say to the Israeli government to continue really inciting what they've been doing so successfully, what would you tell them now as you think about the maturing of the entrepreneurial ecosystem and coming out to you?
Yeah, I think it's really about making sure that companies have the access to those investors and they have the ability to grow their companies and hire the right number of engineers. And you know, we see that problem here in the Silicon Valley. You can't get enough engineers here, and they're expensive, and it's hard to retain them. So I think in small markets like Israel, you have the same type of issues.
And then I have two more questions. So what number one piece of advice would you give to those companies that are really interested in going public?
Just make sure you're ready, and make sure that you, as I said, I think Tim said as well, make sure you have predictability. You kind of know where your revenues are going and where your company's going, and make sure you're ready, because once you're public, you're public.
You're public, you can't go back. And then the last question is, when's the window going to open?
My crystal ball's not here, but no, we'll see a couple of companies probably test the market in April. But most of the companies we're talking to are definitely saying they're seeing June as the window of opportunity. Again, that means that's if nothing else happens in the market and the VIX remains low. So we could see a decent IPO market in June.
That's the final word from Bruce. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.